Welcome back, everybody, to the Successful Events Podcast. I am excited for this episode today because I'm actually taking a snippet from one of the webinars that we had inside the event host community. And I got to break it up a little bit because we had the founder and CEO of HeySummit actually come in and host an hour-long session and training with the community members, which was amazing. And he brought up some really good points. So what I've done is I've actually pulled out specific questions and information that he touched on that I feel could be beneficial to you all. And of course, if you want full access to the training, it is inside the community. Would love to have you join and be a part of it if you are an event host, somebody who has their own events or is planning their own events. Basically, you're doing both, event host and planner potentially as well. But would love to have you inside. For now, for this episode, enjoy hearing from Ben and I just some key takeaways on both virtual events as well as in-person events and how HeySummit could really support you in executing and planning and really all stages along the successful event journey. So without further ado, enjoy the episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Successful Events Podcast, your go-to podcast for hosting impactful, purpose-driven events. I'm your host, Kat Roten, an event strategist and logistics expert here to help you plan and execute events with confidence. You'll hear from top industry experts sharing the latest trends, live coaching calls with myself and fellow community members, and of course, my personal favorite, strategies to help you stay true to your vision without the burnout while you're event planning. But here's the thing, your event isn't just about the details. It's a time to celebrate your hard work, to show up fully in your energy at your event, and to lead with confidence. That's why we focus on self-care, intentionality, and making sure your event aligns with your purpose so it doesn't just look good, but it also feels good for you too. Let's simplify the process and make it unforgettable. I am so excited to have a special guest with us, and it is the founder of HeySummit, and that's Ben Dell, located over in the UK, which we were just chatting about and everything. But so excited to have you, Ben, to kind of dive into virtual events, in-person events, the difference between the two, the different ways to do it, and then how HeySummit really supports. I mean, I'll be honest, we have a few people actually in the community who have used HeySummit. So one just got off a huge virtual, summit they hosted, actually they're in it. But I know a lot of them are curious, and I would love to learn more about really how can you maximize and utilize it for the virtual and the in-person side too. So welcome to the event host community.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you to let you introduce yourself officially and then jump in.
Fantastic. Thanks, Catherine. Really appreciate it. And yeah, there are probably going to be a few parts that will be quite high level that we'll be talking about and conceptual, which will be quite interesting just to kind of get you thinking. But then, as Catherine mentioned, there will be some deep dives into how you actually do the thing that we're talking about to try and make it a slightly practical sort of video for you to then, as Catherine was saying, sort of pause, come back to, and kind of build some confidence and some ideas about how you can actually use a tool like HeySummit to build out that virtual event. Okay, so yeah, who am I? I'm Ben. I'm the founder, CEO at HeySummit. We've actually been around for about 7 years now, which is crazy. Just before COVID, and we all know what happened in COVID from a communication standpoint, and how and work habits and everything else. And so it's a fascinating industry to be in, and from our side, it's fascinating, but actually, more importantly, it's fascinating and so exciting, I think, from the consumer's side, because, and that's you, the people who are potentially considering running an event, because there is so much opportunity. There was a lot of opportunity before COVID, but even more so now, because the people you will be selling to, or the people who will become your attendees, you're not having to educate them anymore about what an event is, what a replay is, how to open Zoom. Literally before COVID, we would have to include some information in the emails that our platform would send out to explain to people, this is where you go to download Zoom, this is what you do to install it. You don't need to do that anymore. We all know, it's second nature. So there is
very different.
a technological leap, I think, and sea change in how we all interact with these sorts of things that just make it so easy for you to create something. And then our job is just to make the actual creation of the event itself super easy and fun and kind of most importantly effective, so that you can reach your revenue goals, attendee goals, all that sort of thing. So yeah, I think what might be quite interesting is just to lay the groundwork and talk about well, what is an event? Because actually, when you think about it, or when you start planning out your event, the reality is that your event that you might be running, Catherine, might be completely different to the one I'm creating, and that's as it should be. An event is very personal to your goals. We were talking about revenue goals or attendee goals or just brand awareness or whatever that is. So you've got that on one side. You've then got the limitations of your audience. So maybe there's your geographical limitation. So maybe you're going to do it in person because you want to do something in person. And so there's that type of event. Maybe it's going to be online, and because you want to reach a broader audience and you want to have replays so that people can watch them afterwards. Or maybe you're doing something in between, what we would call a hybrid event, where you're going to have some people watching in person and some people watching online. And then you've got another layer on top of that, which is, well, how are you going to sell tickets, or what is the structure of those tickets going to feel like? Is it going to be an entirely free event? Is it going to be an entirely paid event? Is it going to be something in between? Are you going to have add-ons so people can add things to their plans? Then maybe they can have a free ticket and then have a paid add-on. We also accept donations, so there's another sort of layer on there. If you're we have a lot of religious groups and political groups and sort of community groups, as well as charities and non-profits as well, where actually the ability to provide maybe free access to a value-packed event, but then have the opportunity for you as an organization to generate revenue or donations specifically can be super powerful. So there's just so many different ways of slicing it. And then, of course, you've got the actual format of the event itself, whether it's online or in person or whatever. Are we talking 2 talks on a Monday afternoon, or are we actually talking 5 talks a day for 5 days? And so it really can vary. And in fact, we're seeing more and more customers now doing less, well, not less of them doing it, but we're seeing more and more doing things that aren't necessarily contained to a fixed time frame. So we're going to do something on a Monday afternoon, or we're going to do something from a Monday to a Friday, but instead saying this is an ongoing, an open-ended event. And an event kind of loses a little bit of meaning now, I suppose, because what they're instead doing is saying, we've got a community, we've got content or live streams that we want to share with people. Maybe some of those are pre-recorded, but we want to continually add that value to our community. And so we want to have a community that we're going to create on HeySummit that maybe once a month we're going to do an exclusive interview that we're going to make live. And so we're now using HeySummit as a platform to create an open-ended delivery of both live and pre-recorded content. So one thing to take away from that ramble that I've just said there is that there are just so many ways to structure your event, to price your event, to think about how you're going to engage with your audience.
And I'm going to jump in.
Yeah,
I was saying, I'm going to
yeah.
jump in right here
Yeah.
real quick, Ben, because for you listening, this goes back to the foundations. And just so you know, Ben, as well, as I have like these core 5 foundational elements that you have to decide on. And it comes down to like, why are you hosting the event? What size and type is it? That's deciding if it's virtual versus in person, how big, what's the format. That includes also the pricing behind it. Do you want to be profitable? Is this more you're just trying to break even, and cover your costs because you're trying to bring them and funnel them into something else? So think about that. I think everything you said there, I 100% agree. Every event is unique. And that's why I personally love events. And I love supporting you all watching the recording, because this is so important for you to also understand, like, you really can't host the wrong type of event unless it's just wrong for you. So I just had to jump in there and just remind them about the foundation stuff, because that's what I talk about all the time as well. So thank you.
No, I love that, actually, because with everything I've just been saying, it would be so easy to kind of fall into the trap of then signing up for a trial on HeySummit and going, oh, hang on, I can create donations, and I can create tiered pricing, and what do I do? So actually, you're absolutely right. Be intentional about what you're actually trying to achieve here. Come up with, make some decisions before you start, whether it's HeySummit or anything else. Make those decisions first and foremost about why you're targeting, who you're targeting, whether this is a money-making enterprise or whether it's a lead generation. Work those things out first, knowing that you can make some tweaks if you want to. If you discover that there's an opportunity to do something different down the line, that's fine. But have a broad kind of view as to what you're trying to do before you then jump into a tool like HeySummit, because otherwise you're going to be like, well, hang on, what's the best option here? And the only option, as you said, is the option that you've decided for you and for your audience. Okay, some good waffle there, I think. Are there any other high-level questions, I think, that maybe that you think might be interesting from your side before we kind of dig into some practical things?
I don't think so, because like most of them are like the pre-recorded versus the live option, like your recommendation, and kind of getting into more the in-person versus virtual stuff. So we'll dive in and I'll kind of ask them as we go.
Cool. Well, actually, let's just touch on that pre-recorded versus live bit as well,
Okay.
because there is just in insofar as Hey Summit is concerned, anyway. Um, we have a library of integrations, is the way to think about it, that we support. And so on the one side, you're deciding, is a single talk going to be, and by the way, I'm saying single talk, not event, because actually you can mix and match within an event. You don't have to have the entire event be live or the entire event be pre-recorded. You could have your 9 a.m. be live, your 10 a.m. be pre-recorded, and so on and so forth. But first you decide, is it live pre-recorded on a talk by talk basis? But then you're deciding, this is within Hey Summit, so this is unique to us, I suppose. Then you're deciding the integration that you want to use or the provider that you want to use to deliver that broadcast. Now, when it comes to pre-recorded, they're much of the nothing. They're much, they're all pretty much doing the same thing. We're talking Wistia or Vimeo or YouTube, and really all you're doing is just linking it up to your Hey Summit talk. So that's quite straightforward, and then we sort of embed it in your sort of Hey Summit talk page. But when it comes to the live experience, there are a bunch of providers that you need to choose. And actually, I don't know how much you, Catherine, talk about the live broadcasting side of things, but this is, I think, where tripping up is the wrong word, but it's one area that can add some complication, and sometimes unnecessarily, if you are unclear about how you're going to broadcast a live talk. We support things like Zoom, which we're in now. And if you've never done live before and you're not familiar with any other integrations that we'll look at in a minute, then probably you just want to go with Zoom, because we all know how to do it. You can invite 10 or as many speakers as you want. Your attendees are your attendees, sort of watching it, and it's quite straightforward. Whereas you could use something like Vimeo Live or even YouTube Live, StreamYard we support, and a bunch of other ones. But in some of those cases, you need to then have software installed on your Mac or your Windows and pipe things in from various places, and then sort of put your lower third graphics on there. And so there are degrees to which you can make this more and more kind of customized, I suppose. And so just know where you sit on that spectrum. Are you comfortable with all that sort of customization? Which case you want to roll with your own sort of solution, and then just sort of pick one of the providers that you know works with that, and you will know if you're in that sort of bracket. And if you're not sort of as comfortable with all that customization, go with probably, I would say, StreamYard or Zoom, I would say, are the two easiest to use sort of solutions that give you all of the functionality that you need in terms of having presenters, being able to share their screen, and all that sort of stuff.
So now that you know a little bit about Ben and Hey Summit in particular, now Ben is going to dive into a little bit of what he calls thirds, which is like the time frame he considers that you need for really planning, promoting, and executing on your virtual event specifically. But he also touches on just in general the planning process and how it's beneficial to even allow yourself more time than not. So take a listen in to Ben's kind of thoughts around the idea of thirds.
You want to make sure that you put time aside to actually do the promotion work. And I usually say it's a game of thirds is generally a very simplistic way of thinking about it, but you've got kind of the first third, if we want to say maybe a month, is setting up. You can create an event in a matter of minutes, but really in practical terms, doing that refinement, changing the copy on the landing page, etc. You want to give yourself a good 30 days to kind of do the building out part. Then you've got the promotional part, and I would say give yourself a good month for that. As with anything promotional, anything marketing, the more time you have, the more impact you're going to get. The less time, the more you're going to be rushing and finding those attendees at the very last minute. So give yourself a bit of time. And then the final month, not really a month, but is basically executing the event, and maybe doing a bit of sort of reporting on the back of it afterwards, counting your money if you've made a bunch, et cetera, et cetera.
In this next section, Ben takes a higher level perspective on Hey Summit, kind of answering my question that I had around how can Hey Summit support not just virtual events, but also in-person events, because myself especially, I am definitely more in the in-person world, and a lot of those in my community are as well. Now, virtual events, as I mentioned in the previous episode, are becoming huge. So I wanted to ask him, how can Hey Summit support both sides? And then also, when it comes to being maybe in the beginning stages, it's your first event or your first 2 or 3 events, what are his thoughts around using Hey Summit versus using and paying for other platforms versus just using like Eventbrite or one of those other free platforms that you can use instead. So take a listen in to really learn about how can HeySummit be supportive for in-person and virtual events, as well as kind of what are Ben's recommendations if you're at the very beginning stages of hosting your first event or first few events.
Let's talk high level for a second. What is it that HeySummit actually does from a broad platform bit, just very, very high level? Landing page, marketing pages, we've looked at the registration and checkout, ticketing management, and then obviously all the management in the back end. We have an affiliate program, sponsors, and then when the talks are broadcast, they're streamed on the pages, and of course the replays are there as well. So when we then look at, well, what's the difference between an in-person and an online? Well, actually, with all those things I've just listed, you still need the majority of those for an in-person. You still need the landing page, you still need the checkout, you still need payment registration flow. You just don't need the broadcasting bit. So actually, yeah, everything is that I'm showing you here is identical for the in-person. And actually, when you think about it, and for a lot of our customers who are coming to us having done in-person in the past already, lots of different ways of doing it, of course, but invariably a lot of them are coming from Eventbrite and places like that. That's just a super simple single page describing the event with a really straightforward, quite clunky looking kind of registration form. Here you get the benefit of the marketing pages, the fluidity of it, your own theming, branding, payment processing, custom registration flow, add-ons, donations, all that sort of stuff baked in. So even if you're only using us for in-person, there's so much benefit that you'll get from it.
And that's what I've seen even just from my clients using it. Because I think I mentioned to you, I've had a few clients use HeySummit, and a few of our members have. And it's the custom, oh my goodness, customability. I don't know what you want to say with that word. But just being able to customize the way you can versus an Eventbrite or something. And that's where a lot of my clients are like, I'm putting it on Eventbrite. And I'm like, you can't. It's like, it looks the same as every other event aside from maybe a picture or two. So that's what I love this for, is that it's good for both my clients working the virtual side, doing virtual summits, virtual events, but then also the in-person, because they really can customize it, and you already have integrated payments. It just simplifies the whole process for them.
It does. And you might disagree with this, and say if you do, but I would say there's nothing wrong necessarily with starting out on something like Eventbrite or Zoom if you're doing online, because ultimately, if it's your very first one, the most important thing is that you test your hypothesis. So those 5 things or 4 things or whatever it is you're sort of deciding that you want to try and achieve, ultimately what it boils down to is, can you prove that those things can bear out into reality, into results?
Yes.
And sometimes the most efficient way to do that, if you just want to know, I have a bunch of 10 experts who can talk about dogs. Is there an appetite for people to listen to that content? And actually, sometimes you just want to put it out there as quickly as you possibly can to see whether there's a bit of a bite. Now, you will never be as effective as you would be using a tool like this, because there's just so much more intelligence that goes into a tool like this. But if all you're trying to test is there an appetite, is there a demand for it, actually sometimes that might be the right route to go. So, but certainly once you've done that first one, you then want to kind of, ideally kind of up your game, make it a bit more professional, and just give yourself all those options that we've just been speaking about.
Exactly. And I 100% agree with what you said there.
And we are to our final stage of the episode. And in this kind of section, Ben dives into how HeySummit really supports you in your email marketing. And I will say I was completely blown away with this when I first started looking into HeySummit, and then seeing even more extensively and going through the 3 different types of emails that you should be sending and you can send inside HeySummit, and how they're all pre-written for you and you can edit and make tweaks. It also was a great part of our training when we went through this, where he discussed how, yes, your first event should be really simplified. And we talked about this in the last section that you just heard from. But in this one, we also dive into how your first event and your first few events are what can set you up for success and easy duplication for years to come for your next events, if they're quarterly, every 6 months. And really how HeySummit can really be like a almost copy and paste. And then you just have to make the tweaks, and it becomes really time saving. And this is what I talk about in the community too, is if you set yourself up at the beginning in those first few events, it's so much easier to duplicate and re-host events moving forwards, especially if they're similar to your first few, but you continue to improve and make tweaks as you go. So listen into this final section with Ben, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts.
We'll sort of move on to the next step, I think, because really what an event is all about really are the emails and the content. So we have an email platform baked in, and as I mentioned before, what we call transactional emails. So these are all the event-driven emails. Someone buys tickets, a talk is about to start, or it's day one of the event, things like that. That's what we call transactional emails, and they're all loaded in by default with best practice templates. Nothing you need to do; they just work out of the box. Though I do say and often recommend, come in here, take a note of what is actually being sent, and we'll describe it here. And so this is sent to attendees within 1 hour. In plain English, we'll explain under what scenario that will be sent. Take a judgment call. If you know that you don't care about that particular one, just turn it off. You can just go in there and start editing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's there to manage and edit and turn on and off as you need to, but by default, everything's in, ready to go. And then on top of that, you've got broadcast and auto emails. And these are basically one-off emails that you can then create either as an email sequence so that anyone who falls into that audience segmentation in the future, so you might say, send it to any attendee that doesn't have this ticket, or anyone who does have this ticket, or talking about the UTM parameters before, anyone who has this UTM parameter, you can go that granular. And then once you've activated it, if someone registers in 2 weeks' time and they fall into that criteria, they will be sent that email. And so that's the auto message that we have up here, whereas broadcast is all of that, but it's just sent once. So it's a snapshot in time. Whoever satisfies that criteria at that time will be sent. And you can go in there and we've got an audience builder. And so you can build this up, ands, ors, all the things that you've probably seen on lots of other platforms. We can sort of, with this ticket, without that ticket, add new filters. And we give you a lot of different ways that you can sort of filter that down to create that audience. And it's not just for attendees. You can email speakers, sponsors, your team members, hosts, affiliates, etc., and just create these platforms. And what's, again, just another meta sort of tip here, I suppose. One of the things that is most impactful, I find, with people who are starting out with HeySummit is what they then do with their second and third event. And so on one side, keeping that first event simple, but on the other side of that coin, recognizing that when it comes to your second and third and subsequent events, you can just come over here, click clone, and take that template that you've now invested time into creating the landing page and tweaking the email content and email sequences and settings and all those sorts of things, cloning it, and that's now the template, the master copy, if you will, for your second event. And now maybe you're going to tweak a few more things, and that becomes your new master, and you clone that one for your third. And so you can really sort of take that learning from one event to the next really, really easily. So do think about that as you work through.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I definitely enjoyed my hour-long talk with Ben. It was fantastic. This is just literally a snippet, like about a third or a fourth of the conversation that we had. He actually gave us a full dive into HeySummit and walked us through the different sections and how to utilize it. And these 3 different questions and areas that we just touched on are just such a brief part. So if you are interested, like I said, all of this recording and many others are inside the Event Host community along with 20 plus resources. Would love to see you in there. If not, what I would love to know though is if you can share this with somebody you think it could benefit, if you could share it on your social, but drop in with me, hit me up in the DMs. I would love to know what were your takeaways and did you enjoy this episode? Because I would love to be able to keep doing this as if something you are interested in. Again, it's just very small snippets from the full conversation and the full training that was hosted inside the community. So just imagine this, but like 10 times. Also, details are in the show notes to really go check out HeySummit, connect with them, and just check out the platform and see what stands out to you. Could it benefit you, whether you're hosting a virtual event or an in-person event? Please go check them out. I've linked everything in the show notes. I even have an affiliate link option for you, where if you are interested in signing up, you can using that link. Obviously, it does give me a kickback, and you do get a discount as well when you first join. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please drop in, let me know. And if you feel called, please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify or anywhere you listen to this podcast. We would love to continue getting this out to people who it could truly benefit. But for now, I have so much gratitude for you. Thank you so much for listening in. And I will see you next time on the Successful Events podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you loved hearing from today's guest, imagine having direct access to them and more incredible event hosts, preferred speakers and vendors, and other industry experts just like them. That's exactly what you'll find inside the event host community. This is your space to connect, collaborate, and learn from others who are building purpose-driven events just like you. Plus, as a member, you'll get exclusive access to live calls, resources, and support from me to help you plan and execute with confidence. Also, as a listener of the podcast, use the code PODCAST in all caps to get access to the community for $97 per month your first 6 months. Connect with today's guest through the links below and join us in the community to keep this conversation going. I'll see you next time.